Hello, welcome to another edition of Christ Over Coffee. I'm Pastor Chris Byers of St. John's Lutheran Church in beautiful Gillett, Wisconsin. Glad to have you here as we go through the study, and we're just going through the Word of God. That's it. And we'll use some other resources every once in a while just to talk about or highlight things that are going on. But primary source here is the Word of God. We're going to look at the Word of God, read through it. I go through it verse by verse. Last night's class, we went through quite a bit. We started at the 6th chapter, and we made it all the way to the 12th chapter. And we're going to go through, and then we'll start up. We could have entered into the next one, but we're going to start up the next time. We're going to start into Samson as a story as a whole. So what we're beginning with, as in the 6th chapter, is we look in the chapters prior. Deborah and them had, Barak and them had, and Sisera was defeated. So the song of Deborah and Barak was sung of the victory that they had, what had happened to Sisera, and how they fell. So now we are going through and entering into the next period, because there's a period of peace of 40 years. It says right at the end of the 5th chapter that they had 40 years of peace, and God had intervened for them. Now, the struggle of this always is God intervenes and then they rebel again. And truth be told, that's the major issue, is they continue to rebel. Now, as is the case, if you like to, you'd like to comment if you're watching this live, or even if you leave a question or anything on there, and I will follow up. I do see any comments or posts if there's questions or things about this. The study here, and maybe some questions about what's going on. I'm hoping that you're finding, those of you that do watch this, do find it to be helpful and building up in the faith. And continuing on as we move forward, just keep the discussion going. If you find this to be helpful, feel free to share this abroad and let everybody, anybody who wants to grow in the faith and go through the Word of God. That's the whole point. Is we want to get through the Word of God and get and understand it, because this is where God is speaking to us. One of the things that does come up a lot, and it came up as afterwards discussion, is we do have a lot of violence that you're going to read within Joshua and Judges especially. But there's violence throughout the entirety, especially in the Old Testament, because a lot of what it highlights, and you do see it in the New too, but what it highlights is the human nature of not wanting to submit to God's authority, but wanting to be an authority unto oneself. We still fight this today, don't we? Because as a culture, as a people, our sinful nature is we like to think that we are the ones that are in control. But the reality is God is saying, let us be in control. One thing, a debate that's been arising back and forth with my two oldest sons. I have one son who just loves the idea of the monarchy and all of that. He really loves studying the time of the monarchs and that history. It's fascinating for him, he romanticizes it a little bit, as we all do, on things that we find passionate. One thing about the Bible is, if you really get into the Bible, you're going to find out that there is very little to romanticize. We do romanticize it, but in it, these heroes of the faith are not different from us in the sense that they have no sin within them. There's only one that walked this earth without sin, and that was Jesus. But as humans, we all are full of sin, and we do and make wrong decisions, even the heroes of the faith. And the Bible does not hide that when you read the Bible. They don't make them to be superhumans, in essence, that they didn't do things wrong or things they have. God uses them supernaturally, that is true. And there are supernatural aspects or events that occur through God and His blessing. But as people, God is using sinful, broken people, and He continues to do that. He does that for us too. So when we read this, it's always important to see God's grace in the midst of it. One of the questions asked again, and it comes up, is, why were they so violent? Why did they have to wipe out why were they meant to wipe out? Like, you go read through Joshua. They were meant to wipe out all the Canaanites. They weren't meant to make treaties and all them. The Israelites were supposed to be like a flood, a second flood upon, not a flood of water, but a flood of God's chosen to flood into the area of Israel and take it over and cast out all of the things, the people and the idols and all of that, to create a nation of people that will be faithful to God's word and his ways. But God knew they wouldn't do this. He also knew that. But he placed it there as an opportunity. It should also highlight the reality is no matter how much we try or how much we like to think we're so good, the truth is we're not. And without God's intervention, there's very little hope for us. But we're going to continue on, because I'm going to tell you that none of the judges don't get really any better. There's some that you'll find that there's just a very little mention about them. So they didn't do as much evil, or their story was kind of humdrum in the sense of what they did. Doesn't say they had peace as long. They just often, it starts to move from, it just tells how long they reigned. What was going on in the midst of that? Other than some of the little details, we don't really go in. I'm sure there were other things of history and documents that were out there that have probably been lost in history, but they were never within the canon of Scripture. It wasn't something that they carried on because these were not. There was nothing, I guess, exceptional that they really did during their reign. In that essence, is what they're saying. Other than God used them to be able to help maybe draw the people back to God. But we're going to continue and find that they're not better. They don't get better. We've actually had the best of the judges already. So when we look at that, just keep that in mind and see it's God's way of saying, the only way to get rid of sin is to keep yourself away from it. Wipe it out. Don't make it a part of you or who you are. Don't excuse it, or once it enters in, it's going to spoil you. It's going to cause you to stumble and not be as faithful as you should be. So we're going to start with the 6th chapter, 1st verse. Then the sons of Israel did what was evil in the eyes of Yahweh, and Yahweh gave them into the hands of Midian 7 years. All right, so they had 40 years. Then they turn back a generation, basically. They turn back, and they do what's evil in God's sight again. And the power of Midian prevailed against Israel. Because of Midian, the sons of Israel made for themselves the dens which were in the mountains, and the caves, and the strongholds. And it was when Israel had sown that the Midians would go up with the Amalekites and the sons of the east and go up against them. So they would camp against them and ruin the produce of the earth as far as Gaza, and leave no sustenance in Israel, as well as no sheep, ox, or donkey. For they would go up with their livestock and their tents. They would come in like locusts for number. Both they and their camels were innumerable. And they came into the land to make it a ruin. So Israel was brought very low against Midian. And the sons of Israel cried out to Yahweh. They're crying out to God. They're saying, God, remember us, forget. But they had turned away, right? They had turned away. And we're going to find out how far they turned away as we read through this, as we continue on. It's one of those sad realities when we think of Gideon. They're crying out to God, but listen to what they're still doing, right? Now it happened when the sons of Israel cried out to Yahweh on account of Midian, that Yahweh sent a prophet to the sons of Israel, and he said to them, Thus says Yahweh the God of Israel, It was I who brought you up from Egypt, and brought you out from the house of slavery. I delivered you from the hands of the Egyptians, and from the hands of all your oppressors, and drove them out before you, and gave you their land. And I said to you, I am Yahweh your God. You shall not fear the gods of the Amorites, in whose land you live. But you have not listened to my voice. So this prophet, unnamed, we don't know who the prophet is, because it's the message that God was using this prophet to give to the people of God. Listening to my voice. That means he's calling them out there for their idolatry. Then the angel of Yahweh came and sat under the oak that was at Ophrah, which belonged to Joash the Abiezerite, as his son Gideon was beating out wheat in the winepress in order to preserve it from the Midianites. So an angel of the Lord comes and presents himself to Gideon. So this is where we see this. Imagine this image here. And the angel of Yahweh appeared to him and said to him, Yahweh is with you, O mighty man of valor. Then Gideon said to him, O my Lord, if Yahweh is with us, why then has all this happened to us? And where are all the wondrous deeds which your fathers recounted to us, saying, Did not Yahweh bring us up from Egypt? But now Yahweh has abandoned us and given us into the hand of Midian. So if God's so great, he's saying, basically, we say, then why are we being forgotten? If we're chosen by God, why are we now being forgotten? If he is so wonderful, so great, if he is the one that's with us, why he's allowed this to happen? It sounds very similar to what we hear in our world today. You know, why does God allow bad things to happen? You know, why doesn't God just stop? Why doesn't God just stop the people from doing this evil? Well, here, this is where this dialogue starts to begin. Is he's somewhat challenging the person, the angel of the Lord, the angel of Yahweh, the angel of God. All right. Then we're on the 14th verse. Then Yahweh turned to him and said, Go in this strength of yours and save Israel from the hand of Midian. Have I not sent you? But he said to him, O Lord, with what shall I save Israel? Behold, my clan is the least in Manasseh, and I am the youngest in my father's house. So this is the half tribe of Manasseh. They are up on the corner up there by the Sea of Galilee, or the Sea of Kinnereth, or the Kinnereth Sea at this time they're calling it. So he's up there, and he says, I'm of the smallest tribe. But Yahweh said to him, Surely I will be with you, and you shall strike down Midian as one man. So God's saying, trust in my power, not your own. I will be with you. Trust me. This is a big theme you're going to say over and over again. God is saying, trust me. Now with Gideon, we're going to see how it works here on here. Now Gideon still is with the armies. Now with Samson, we're going to find later, no, he does this on his own. But here, Gideon is being told, I'm gonna use you. Trust me. So Gideon said to him, If now I have found favor in your eyes, then do a sign for me, that it is you who speak with me. Now I'm going to warn you about doing these, asking God for a sign, because understanding God, he will give you a sign, and you may not appreciate it. But see, Gideon, doesn't sound like he really wants this task for him. He doesn't want to believe that this is truly from God. All right, but he goes on. Please do not depart from here until I come back to you, and I bring out my offering and lay it before you. And he said, I will remain until you return. So Gideon went in and prepared a young goat and unleavened bread from an ephah of flour. He put the meat in a basket and the broth in a pot, and brought them out to him under the oak and presented them. And the angel of God said to him, Take the meat and the unleavened bread and lay them on this rock and pour out the broth. And he did so. Then the angel of Yahweh put out the end of the staff that was in his hand and touched the meat and the unleavened bread, and fire sprang up from the rock and consumed the meat and the unleavened bread. Then the angel of Yahweh went away from before his eyes. So he does this. This is his first sign. This is that sign he's given. Does it stop here? Sadly, no. But we're going to continue on with this. And Gideon saw that he was the angel of Yahweh, and so he said, Alas, O Lord Yahweh, for now I have seen the angel of Yahweh face to face. And Yahweh said to him, Peace to you. Do not fear, you shall not die. So Gideon built an altar there to Yahweh and named it Yahweh's Peace. To this day it is still in Ophrah of the Abiezerites. Now, it happened on the same night that Yahweh said to him, Take your father's bull and a second bull 7 years old, and pull down the altar of Baal, which belongs to your father, and cut down the Asherah that is beside it. and build an altar to Yahweh your God on the top of this stronghold in an orderly manner, and take the second bull and offer a burnt offering with the wood of the Asherah, which you shall cut down. So Gideon took 10 men of his servants and did as Yahweh had spoken to him. And now it happened that because he was too afraid of his father's household and the men of the city to do it by day, he did it by night. So you see the problem here is they are worshiping a false idol. They're crying out to the one true God, but they have all their idols there too, just hedging their bets. Baal, that he is an idol there for, thinking of cattle and all of that as bringing the cattle and having strong bulls in that. So the sign of the Baals are a bull. And then you have this Asherah, which is a big pole. And you can think about that as even in cultures across the globe. Asherah, they call them different names. I mean, you think about even my mind goes to those of, if you think of Scandinavian background descent, it is practice around May 1st, the beginning of May, to do a maypole. And you set up the maypole, and you may have seen pictures on there. They drive and the young women dress, and young men sometimes and women, they'll dress in traditional clothing, and they'll have ribbons and they'll dance around the maypole. That's similar to what the Asherah is. It is a fertility god. Asheroth is a fertility god, and the pole they would set up, and that was asking and praying for fertility. And one we could also say we see it within totems, within Native American culture, would be similar on that, for protection or fertility. Those are all idols, right? They are established to false gods. So no follower, no Israelite should have had those in their presence, an altar to Baal or an Asheroth pole, a pole there. So those were things that God had forbid. And as Christians, we should not put those things in our yards or practice them either within our faith, because they were doing what we had called today syncretism, trying to say it was God and the reality is we worship the one true God, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, and that's what we need to focus on. So here Gideon's afraid of his father's household. He's afraid of the people. So he's not going to do this boldly in front of everybody. He does it at night when very few, where people are sleeping, so the chances of him being seen are less. And he set it up. So then we come on to the 28th chapter, and we're going to find out how far the people of Israel had been moved from worshiping, how deep this syncretism was in the faith. And this is a reality we should really think about, and even use it as a caution in our own practice. Are there things that we're adding into our faith that are not biblical, that are not of God, that are maybe idolatrous in their nature? Now, we can be careful on that. I mean, is it idolatrous to place statues in the church? No. If you worship those statues or give them greater veneration, then just as a memorial, if they're a memorial, that's fine. Crosses are the same. Stained glass windows are the same. Decorations and memorials within their church and our church life and our communities aren't what God is against. Now, if we start to worship and pray at those memorials, then we cross a line. Then they become idols. So here is this idolatry that is rising within Israel, the syncretism that we see. And is there that in the churches today? Most certainly. There are churches that are very syncretistic, meaning that they're taking other ideas from other faiths and bring them in. For example, we never do burning sage and smudging. That should not be done in a Christian church. That is of other multiple faiths. That's not only Native American, but other pagan traditions also do the same thing. Witchcraft does that also. We have to think about that in our practice. What are we adding? Let's not add things in because we think it's awesome or we think it's cool or we think it's got some deeper meaning. We won't put crystals on our altars, right? Those are the things we need to stay away from. So let's think about here as we go to the 28th verse here. Then the men of the city arose early in the morning, and behold, the altar of Baal was torn down, and the Asherah which was beside it was cut down, and the second bull was offered on the altar which had been built. And they said to one another, Who did this thing? And when they searched about and inquired, they said, Gideon the son of Joash did this thing. Then the men of the city said to Joash, Bring out your son, that he may die, for he has torn down the altar of Baal, and indeed he has cut down the Asherah which was beside it. But Joash said to all who stood against him, Will you contend for Baal, or will you save him? Whoever will contend for him shall be put to death by morning. If he is a god, let him contend for himself, because someone has torn down his altar. Therefore on that day he named him Jerubbaal, that is to say, let Baal contend against him, because he had torn down his altar. So they even changed it. The father, his own father, had changed his name. Israelites had been this was so much ingrained in them that they thought this was part of something that they needed to protect. Not standing for the word of God. Not standing up and saying, well, no, we don't need to protect this because it's not of God. So you see the problem here. It's very problematic what we see going on within the people of Israel at this day, and even his father. So he's wearing a name that is really reflective of where the Israelite culture had gone, because he had contended against Baal. Now all the Midianites and the Amalekites and the sons of the east assembled themselves, and they crossed over and camped in the valley of Jezreel. But the Spirit of Yahweh clothed Gideon, and he blew a trumpet, and the Abiezrites were called together to follow him. And he sent messengers throughout Manasseh, and they also were called together to follow him. And he sent messengers to Asher, Zebulun, and Naphtali, and they came up to meet him. All right. So we think here, this is something God is showing his power. He's showing him exactly what he's going to do. But now we're going to go on, and we're going to see where Gideon is not 100%, right? He's wanting to make sure. Think that would be enough. Then Gideon said to God, If you will save Israel by my hand, as you have spoken, behold, I will put a fleece of wool on the threshing floor. If there is dew on the fleece only, and it is dry on all the ground, then I will know that you will save Israel by my hand, as you have spoken. I just got to make sure, God. You said you're going to do this, but I want to make sure that you are going to be faithful to the deal you're making with me. That's kind of what he's doing, isn't it? It's a really odd way of showing honor, I believe, but God is gracious. God is merciful. So we see God's mercy coming out through this and what happens next. And it was so. Indeed, he arose early the next morning and squeezed the fleece, and he drained the dew from the fleece in a bowl full of water. Then Gideon said to God, Do not let your anger burn against me, that I may speak once more. Please let me make a test once more with the fleece. Let it now be dry on the fleece, only on the fleece, and let there be dew on all the ground. And God did so that night. So it was dry only on the fleece, but dew was on all the ground. So here we see, why would he lay this fleece down a second time? Well, because he's not trusting God 100%, right? He's not trusting that God is going to do what he says. But we know God is faithful. We know he's very faithful. All right. So then we move on to the 7th chapter. Then Jerubbaal, that is Gideon, and all the people who were with him, rose early and camped against the spring of Harod, and the camp of Midian was on the north side of them by the hill of Moreh in the valley. And Yahweh said to Gideon, The people who are with you are too many for me to give Midian into their hands, lest Israel honor themselves, saying, My own hand has saved me. So now come, call out in the hearing of the people, whoever is afraid and trembling, let him return and depart from Mount Gilead. Saying, 32,000, that's too many. You might take the glory over it and say, oh, look at all the good I have done. And then all of a sudden, what do we have? What's going on here? Who did this? You could take credit where credit isn't due. So we can move on and we say, all right, so 10,000 remain. All right. Then Yahweh said to Gideon, the people are still too many. Bring them down to the water, and I will test them for you. And it will be that he of whom I say to you, this one shall go with you, and he shall go with you. But every one of whom I say to you, this one shall not go with you, he shall not go. So he brought the people down to the water, and Yahweh said to Gideon, everyone who laps the water with his tongue as a dog laps, you shall set him aside by himself, and so also everyone who kneels to drink. Now the number of those who lapped, putting their hand to their mouth, was 300 men, but all the rest of the people kneeled to drink water. And Yahweh said to Gideon, I will save you with the 300 men who lapped, and will give the Midianites into your hands. So let all the other people go, each man to his place. So the 300 men took the provisions and their trumpets into their hands, and Gideon sent all the other men of Israel, each to his tent, but retained the 300 men, and the camp of Midian was below him in the valley. All right, so now he's saying, 10,000 is too many. So now you're going to be so he brings them down to 300 and sends 9,700 of the people away. So a total of 31,700 would have been away. They're down to 300 men. All right. Now it happened the same night that Yahweh said to him, arise, go down against the camp, for I have given it into your hands. But if you are afraid to go down, then both you and Purah, your young man, go down to the camp, and you will hear what they say. And afterward your hands will be strengthened, that you may go down against the camp. So he went with Purah, his young man, down to the outskirts of the armed men that were in the camp. So I'm going to take a drink of coffee here. So we think about that reality. All right, God's showing him all his glory. But he says, well, if you're still afraid, then, well, go down. I will show you that. I'll build you up. So, of course, he goes down. All right? Now the Midianites and the Amalekites and all the sons of the east were lying in the valley as numerous as locusts, and their camels were without number, as numerous as the sand on the seashore. Then Gideon came, and behold, a man was recounting a dream to his friend, and he said, behold, I had a dream. A loaf of barley bread was tumbling into the camp of Midian, and it came to the tent, and it struck so that it fell and turned it upside down, so that the tent lay flat. And his friend answered and said, this is nothing less than the sword of Gideon, the son of Joash, a man of Israel. God has given Midian and all the camp into his hand. So here God is building Gideon up by using this dream and saying, hey, I'm going to interpret this dream, and Gideon, he's this barley that's going to come down, this loaf of bread that's going to When Gideon heard the account of the dream and its interpretation, he bowed in worship. Then he returned to the camp of Israel and said, arise, for Yahweh has given the camp of Midian into your hands. And he divided the 300 men into 3 companies, and he put trumpets and empty pitchers into the hands of all of them, with torches inside the pitchers. Then he said to them, look at me, and do likewise. And behold, I will come to the outskirts of the camp, and it will be that just as I do so you do likewise. And I and all who are with me will blow the trumpet. Then you also shall blow the trumpets all around the camp, and say, for Yahweh and for Gideon. So here Gideon is saying, here, they're afraid of me, they're afraid of God. Because God has put it in their minds that I am the one that is carrying his sword. I am the one that can take him out. So we're on the 19th verse on the 7th chapter. So Gideon and the 100 men who were with him came to the outskirts of the camp at the beginning of the middle watch, when they had just set up the watch, and they blew the trumpets and smashed the pitchers that were in their hands. Then the 3 companies blew the trumpets and broke the pitchers, and they held their torches in their left hands and the trumpets in their right hands for blowing and calling out, "A sword for Yahweh and for Gideon!" And each stood in his place around the camp. Then all the camp ran, and they made a loud shout and fled. So they blew 300 trumpets, and Yahweh set the sword of one against another, even throughout the whole camp. And the camp fled as far as Beth Shittah, toward Zerah, as far as the edge of Abel-Maholah by Tabbath. And the men of Israel were summoned from Naphtali and Asher and all Manasseh, and they pursued Midian. Now Gideon had sent messengers throughout all the hill country of Ephraim, saying, "Come down to meet Midian and capture the waters before them, as far as Beth-barah and the Jordan." So all the men of Ephraim were summoned, and they captured the waters as far as Beth-barah and the Jordan. Then they captured the 2 princes of Midian, Oreb and Zeeb. And they killed Oreb at the rock of Oreb, and they killed Zeeb at the winepress of Zeeb. Then they pursued Midian and brought the heads of Oreb and Zeeb to Gideon from across the Jordan. So here the Ephraimites are called in, and they love a good fight. They like to clean up in the battle. So now we're in the 8th chapter. Now then the men of Ephraim said to him, "What is this thing you have done to us, not calling us when you went to fight against Midian?" And then they strongly contended with him. But he said to them, "What have I done now in comparison with you? Is not the gleaning of the grapes of Ephraim better than the grape harvest of Abiezer? God has given the princes of Midian, Oreb and Zeeb, into your hands, and what was I able to do in comparison with you?" Then their anger against him subsided when he spoke this word. You realize they're the ones, they want to take all the credit, right? The Ephraimites are very proud. They want to be the warriors. They like to have all the credit, all the power. So here Gideon sets them down. Where's God giving credit here, right? They want to have the fight. Then Gideon and the 300 men who were with him came to the Jordan and crossed over, weary yet pursuing. And he said to the men of Succoth, "Please give loaves of bread to the people who are following me, for they are weary, and I am pursuing Zebah and Zalmunna, the kings of Midian." But the princes of Succoth said, "Are the hands of Zebah and Zalmunna already in your hands, that we should give bread to your army?" Okay, problem here, right? And Gideon said, "Thus when Yahweh has given Zebah and Zalmunna into my hand, then I will thrash your bodies with the thorns of the wilderness and with briars." So he went up from there to Penuel and spoke similarly to them. And the men of Penuel answered him just as the men of Succoth had answered. So he spoke also to the men of Penuel, saying, "When I return safely, I will tear down this tower." Now Zebah and Zalmunna were in Karkor, and their camps with them, about 15,000 men, all who were left of the entire camp of the sons of the east. For the fallen were 120,000 men, who drew the sword. And Gideon went up by the way of those who dwelt in tents on the east of Nobah and Jogbehah, and struck the camp when the camp was unsuspecting. Then Zebah and Zalmunna fled, and he pursued them and captured the kings of Midian. Zebah and Zalmunna and he threw the whole camp into utter fright. Then Gideon, the son of Joash, returned from the battle by the ascent of Heres, and he captured a youth from the men of Succoth and questioned him. So the youth wrote down for him the princes of Succoth and its elders, 77 men. Then he came to the men of Succoth and said, "Behold, Zebah and Zalmunna, about whom you reproached me, saying, Are the hands of Zebah and Zalmunna already in your hand, that we should give bread to your men who are weary?" Then he took the elders of the city, as well as thorns of the wilderness and briars, and with them he taught the men of Succoth a lesson. And he tore down the tower of Peniel, and killed the men of the city. Then he said to Zebah and Zalmunna, "What kind of men were they whom you killed at Tabor?" And they said, "They were like you, each one resembling the son of a king." He said to them, "They were my brothers, the sons of my mother. As Yahweh lives, if only you had let them live, I would not kill you." So he said to them, said to Jether his firstborn, "Rise, kill them." But the youth did not draw his sword, for he was afraid, because he was still a youth. Then Zebah and Zalmunna said, "Rise up yourself and smite us, for as the man so is his might." So Gideon arose and killed Zebah and Zalmunna, and took the crescent ornaments which were on their camels' necks. All right. So far, he's doing pretty good, right? Gideon is being faithful. He's following through. He's asked questions and he's challenged, but here he is. All right, he's trying to stand up. Then the men of Israel said to Gideon, "Rule over us, both you and your son, also your son's son, for you have saved us from the hand of Midian." So they're saying, "Be my king." They're calling him to be their king, right? It's in their hearts. But Gideon said to them, "I will not rule over you, nor shall my son rule over you. Yahweh shall rule over you." Good answer. Good answer. All right. If you'd only stop there. Yet Gideon said to them, "I would make one request to you, that each of you give me an earring from his spoil." For they had gold earrings because they were Ishmaelites. And they said, "We will surely give them." So they spread out a garment, and each one of them threw an earring there from his spoil. And the weight of the gold earrings that he requested was 1,700 shekels of gold, besides the crescent ornaments and the pendants and the purple robes. Necks. Then Gideon made it into an ephod, and placed it in the city Ophrah. And all Israel played the harlot with it there, so that it became a snare to Gideon and his household. So Midian was subdued before the sons of Israel, and they did not lift up their heads any more. And the land was quiet for 40 years in the days of Gideon. All right, Gideon did. Then he makes this ephod. Why, Gideon? Why? And that becomes a snare. He makes an idol, thinking he's honoring God. You see, idols, when we do them and they're things that we worship, that's the problem. Making a memorial and all of that, not. But idols, and this ephod was an idol. And they went to look the wrong direction. He didn't consult God, asking, "What should I do with these things? Should I give this up as a gift?" No, he did it on his own. He followed the practices that were familiar to him around. Then Jerubbaal, the son of Joash, went and lived in his own house. Now Gideon had 70 sons who were his direct descendants, for he had many wives, and his concubine who was in Shechem also bore him a son, and he named him Abimelech. Then Gideon, the son of Joash, died at a good old age, and was buried in the tomb of his father Joash in Ophrah of the Abiezerites. Then it happened, as soon as Gideon was dead, and the sons of Israel turned back, and played the harlot with the Baals, and made Baal Berith their god. Thus the sons of Israel did not remember Yahweh their God, who had delivered them from the hands of all their enemies on every side, nor did they show loving kindness to the household of Jerubbaal, that is Gideon, in accord with all that God had done to Israel. All right, so here we see the pride. He has a concubine, so he has this child that is born out of wedlock, isn't one of his children with one of his wives. He had many wives, but he also had many children. So we see 70 sons plus the one that's of a prostitute. So now we're in the 9th chapter. And Abimelech the son of Jerubbaal went to Shechem to his mother's relatives, and spoke to them, to the whole family of the household of his mother's father, saying, "Speak now in the hearing of all the lords of Shechem, which is better for you? That 70 men, all the sons of Jerubbaal, rule over you, or that one man rule over you? Also remember that I am your bone and your flesh." And his mother's relatives spoke all these words on his behalf in the hearing of all the lords of Shechem, and they were inclined to follow Abimelech. with which Abimelech hired worthless and reckless fellows, and they followed him. Then he came to his father's house at Ophrah and killed his brothers, the sons of Jerubbaal, 70 men, on one stone. But Jotham, the youngest son of Jerubbaal, was left, for he hid himself. Then all the lords of Shechem and all Beth Millo assembled together, and they went and made Abimelech king. By the oak of the pillar which was in Shechem. Then they told Jotham. So he went and stood on the top of Mount Gerizim, and lifted his voice and called out. Thus he said to them, Listen to me, O lords of Shechem, that God may listen to you. The trees shall surely went forth to anoint a king over them. And they said to the olive tree, Reign over us. But the olive tree said to them, Shall I leave my fatness, with which God and men are honored, and go wave over the trees? Then the trees said to the fig tree, You come reign over us. But the fig tree said to them, Shall I leave my sweetness and my good produce, and go to wave over the trees? Then the trees said to the vine, You come reign over us. But the vine said to them, Shall I leave my new vine, which makes God and men glad, and go to wave over the trees? Then all the trees said to the bramble, You come reign over us. And the bramble said to the trees, If in truth you are anointing me as king over you, come and take refuge in my shade. But if not, may fire come out from the bramble and consume the cedars of Lebanon. So now if you have dealt in truth and integrity and made Abimelech king, and if you have dealt well with Jerubbaal and his house, and have dealt with him according to the bountiful works of his hands, for my father fought for you and risked his life, and delivered you from the hand of Midian, but you have risen against my father's house today, and have killed his sons, 70 men on one stone, and have made Abimelech, the son of his maidservant, king over the lords of Shechem, because he is your relative. If then you have dealt in truth and in integrity with Jerubbaal and his house this day, be glad in Abimelech, and let him also be glad in you. And if not, let fire come out from Abimelech, and consume the lords of Shechem and Beth Millo, and let fire come out from the lords of Shechem and from Beth Millo, and consume Abimelech. Then Jotham escaped, and fled, and went to Beer, and remained there because of Abimelech his brother. And Abimelech governed over Israel 3 years. Then God sent an evil spirit between Abimelech and the lords of Shechem, and the lords of Shechem dealt treacherously with Abimelech, so that the violence done to the 70 sons of Jerubbaal might come, and their blood might be laid on Abimelech their brother, who killed them, and on the lords of Shechem, who strengthened his hand to kill his brothers. And the lords of Shechem set men in ambush against him on the tops of the mountains. They robbed all who might pass by them along the road. And it was told to Abimelech. Then Gaal the son of Ebed came with his relatives, and they crossed over into Shechem. And the lords of Shechem put their trust in him. And they went out into the field and gathered the grapes of their vineyards, and trod them and celebrated a festival. And they came into the house of their God, and ate and drank, and cursed Abimelech. Now Gaal the son of Ebed said, Who is Abimelech? Who is Shechem, that we should serve him? Is he not the son of Jerubbaal, and is Zebul not his officer? Serve the men of Hamor, and the father of Shechem. But why should we serve him? Would therefore that this people were under my hand, then I would remove Abimelech. And he told them, and he said to Abimelech, Increase your army, and come out. But Zebul, the ruler of the city, heard the words of Gaal the son of Ebed, and his anger burned. And he sent messengers to Abimelech, deceitfully saying, Behold, Gaal the son of Ebed and his relatives have come to Shechem, and behold, they are stirring up the city against you. So now arise by night, you and the men who are with you, and lie in wait in the field. And it will be in the morning, as soon as the sun is up, that you shall rise early and rush upon the city. And behold, he and the people who are with him will come out against you, and you shall do to them whatever your hand finds pleasing. So Abimelech and all the people who were with him arose by night, and lay await against Shechem in 4 companies. And Gaal the son of Ebed went out, and stood in the entrance of the city gate, and Abimelech and the people who were with him arose from the ambush. Then Gaal saw the people and said to Zebul, Behold, people are coming down from the tops of the mountains. But Zebul said to him, You are seeing the shadow of the mountains as if they were men. Yet Gaal spoke again and said, Behold, people are coming from the highest part of the land, and one company comes by the way of the soothsayer's oak. Then Zebul said to him, Where is your boasting now with which you said, Who is Abimelech, that we should serve him? Is this not the people whom you rejected? Go out now and fight against them, fight with them. So Gaal went out before the lords of Shechem and fought with Abimelech. And Abimelech pursued him, and he fled before him, and many fell slain up to the entrance of the gate. Then Abimelech remained at Arumah, but Zebul drove out Gaal and his relatives so that they could not remain in Shechem. Now it happened the next day that the people went out to the field, and it was told of Abimelech. So he took his people and divided them into 3 companies, and lay in wait in the field. Then he looked, and behold, the people were coming out from the city. So he arose against them, and struck the company who was with him, rushed forward, and stood in the entrance of the city gate. But the other 2 companies rushed upon all who were in the field, and struck them down. So Abimelech fought against the city all that day, and he captured the city and killed the people who were in it. Then he tore the city down, and sowed it with salt. Then all the lords of the tower of Shechem heard it, and they entered the inner chamber of the temple of El-Berit. And it was told to Abimelech that all the lords of the tower of Shechem were gathered together. So Abimelech went up to Mount Zalmon, and he and all the people who were with him. And Abimelech took an axe in his hand, and cut down a branch from the trees, and lifted it, and laid it on his shoulder. Then he said to the people who were with him, What you have seen me do, hurry, and do likewise. And all the people also cut down each one his branch, and followed Abimelech, and put them on the inner chamber, and set the inner chamber on fire over those inside, so that all the men of the tower of Shechem also died, about 1,000 men and women. Then Abimelech went to Thebez, and he camped against Thebez and captured it. But there was a strong tower in the center of the city, and all the men and women with all the lords of the city fled there and shut themselves in, and they went on the roof of the tower. So Abimelech came to the tower and fought against it, and approached the entrance of the tower to burn it with fire. But a certain woman threw an upper millstone on Abimelech's head and smashed his skull. Then he called quickly to the young man, his armor-bearer, and said to him, Draw your sword and put me to death, lest they say of me, a woman killed him. So the young man pierced him through, and he died. Then the men of Israel saw that Abimelech was dead. So each went away to his home. Thus God returned the evil of Abimelech, which he had done to his father in killing his 70 brothers. God also returned all the evil of the men of Shechem on their own heads, and the curse of Jotham the son of Jerubbaal came upon them. All right, so now that was a lot that happened there, but we see, Jerubbaal. He was somebody who was not faithful to God, thought he was did everything under his own power, and the people of God, the Israelites that were in Shechem, they wanted also to be the ones in power. It was the human nature, so they established him as a king, not under God's authority, but under their own and his own authority, and they did it in such a terrible way. But Abimelech only reigned for 3 years, but God took care of him. Now we're on the 10th chapter, first verse. Then after Abimelech died, Tola the son of Puah, the son of Dodo, a man of Issachar, arose to save Israel, and he lived in Shamir in the hill country of Ephraim, and he judged Israel 23 years. Then he died and was buried in Shamir. So we don't really hear much about that. God called this judge up. After him, Jair the Gileadite arose and judged Israel 22 years. And he had 30 sons who rode 30 donkeys, and they had 30 cities in the land of Gilead that are called Havoth Jair to this day. And Jair died and was buried in Canaan. So all we know about him is a little bit about his 30 sons who rode on 30 donkeys. He had many children. All right, 6th chapter. Then the sons of Israel again did what was evil in the eyes of Yahweh, and served the Baals and the Ashtaroth. the gods of Aram, the gods of Sidon, the gods of Moab, the gods of the sons of Ammon, and the gods of the Philistines. Thus they forsook Yahweh and did not serve him. So now they're serving all of these gods, right? They're hedging their bets, not focusing on the one true God. They're adding all this in. So the anger of Yahweh burned against them, or against Israel, and he sold them into the hands of the Philistines, and into the hands of the son of Ammon, and they shattered and smashed the sons of Israel that year. For 18 years they did this to all the sons of Israel who were beyond the Jordan in Gilead, in the lands of the Amorites. Then the sons of Ammon crossed the Jordan to fight against Judah, Benjamin, and the house of Ephraim, so that Israel was greatly distressed. And the sons of Israel cried out to Yahweh, saying, We have sinned against you, for indeed we have forsaken our God and served the Baals. Then Yahweh said to the sons of Israel, Did I not save you from the Egyptians, the Amorites, the sons of Ammon, and the Philistines? Also Sidonians, the Amalekites, and the Maonites oppressed you. And you cried out to me, and I saved you from their hand. Yet you have forsaken me, and served other gods. Therefore I will no longer save you. Go and cry out to the gods which you have chosen. Let them save you in the time of your distress. Then the sons of Israel said to Yahweh, We have sinned. So you do to us whatever seems good in your eyes. Only please deliver us this day. So they removed the foreign gods from among them, and served Yahweh. And he could no longer bear the trouble of Israel no longer. All right, so here God calls them out. They listen, they back down, and they follow what God is calling them to do. They're listening to what God is saying, and they take out these other gods because for this moment. So here we have a good. It seems like good, but let's watch and see what happens. Then the sons of Ammon were summoned, and they camped in Gilead, and the sons of Israel gathered together and camped in Mizpah. And the people, the princes of Gilead, said to one another, Who is the man who will begin to fight against the sons of Ammon? He shall become head over all the inhabitants of Gilead. Were they praying to God for this? Seeking guidance? Or were they asking God, guide us to know who you are raising up to be our next judge, or to who will help guide us? Now Jephthah, the Gileadite, was a mighty man of valor, but he was the son of a harlot. So here he is, an illegitimate child. And Gilead became the father of Jephthah. And Gilead's wife bore him sons, and when his wife's sons grew up, they drove Jephthah out and said to him, You shall not have an inheritance in your father's house, for you are the son of another woman. See the problem? It sounds familiar, doesn't it? All right. So Jephthah fled from his brothers and lived in the land of Tob, and worthless fellows gathered themselves about Jephthah, and they went out with him. Now it happened after a while that the sons of Ammon fought against Israel. So it happened that as the sons of Ammon fought against Israel, the elders of Gilead went to get Jephthah from the land of Tob. And they said to Jephthah, Come out and be our chief, that we may come fight against the sons of Ammon. Then Jephthah said to the elders of Gilead, now this is on the other side of the Jordan, this is not in the main part of Israel, this is on those territories that were on the other side of the Jordan. Did you not hate me? And Jephthah said to the elders of Gilead, Did you not hate me and drive me from my father's house? So why have you come to me now when you are in distress? And the elders of Gilead said to Jephthah, For this reason we have now returned to you, that you may go with us and fight the sons of Ammon, and become head over all the inhabitants of Gilead. So Jephthah said to the elders of Gilead, If you take me back to fight against the sons of Ammon and Yahweh gives them up to me, will I become your head? And the elders of Gilead said to Jephthah, Yahweh is witness between us. Surely we will do as you have said. They did not ask God this, you see here. They are going by their own volition, doing this action. You see this constant, God is using, even though they're not quite doing what they're supposed to, God can still use them, but there is a cost, there is a consequence for this. And the elders of Gilead said to, all right, so the 11th verse. Then Jephthah went to the elders of Gilead, and the people made him head and chief over them. And Jephthah spoke all his words before Yahweh at Mizpah. So he's praying to God. So there is some of the faith there. They're getting back. He's calling them back. God's using him. He's an imperfect judge. He's not a real good fellow, And Jephthah sent messengers to the king of the sons of Ammon, saying, "What is between you and me that you have come to me to fight against my land?" Then the king of the sons of Ammon said to the messengers of Jephthah, "Because Israel took away my land, and when they came up from Egypt, from the Arnon as far as the Jabbok and the Jordan. So now return them peaceably." But Jephthah sent messengers again to the king of the sons of Ammon, and they said to him, "Thus says Jephthah, Israel did not take away the land of Moab, nor the land of the sons of Ammon. For when they came up from Egypt, and Israel went through the wilderness to the Red Sea, and came to Kadesh, then Israel sent messengers to the king of Edom, saying, "Please let us pass through your land." But the king of Edom would not listen. And they also sent to the king of Moab, but he was not willing. So Israel remained at Kadesh. Then they went through the wilderness and around the land of Edom and the land of Moab, and came to the east, toward the sunrise of the land of Moab, and they camped beyond the Arnon. But they did not enter the territory of Moab, for the Arnon was the border of Moab. And Israel sent messengers to Sihon, king of the Amorites, the king of Heshbon. And Israel said to him, "Please let us pass through your land to our place." But Sihon did not believe Israel to allow them to pass through his territory. So Sihon gathered all his people and camped in Jahaz and fought with Israel. Then Yahweh, the God of Israel, gave Sihon and all his people into the hand of Israel. And they struck them down. So Israel possessed all the land of the Amorites, the inhabitants of that country. So they possessed all the territory of the Amorites, from the Arnon as far as the Jabbok, and from the wilderness as far as the Jordan. So now Yahweh, the God of Israel, dispossessed the Amorites from before his people Israel. Are you then to possess it? Do you not possess what Chemosh, your God, gives you to possess? So whatever Yahweh our God has taken possession of before us, we will possess it. So now are you any better than Balak, the son of Zippor, the king of Moab? Did he ever strive with Israel, or did he ever fight against them? While Israel lived in Heshbon and its towns, and in the Aroer and its towns, and in all the cities that are on the banks of the Arnon, 300 years. Why did you not deliver them for yourself within that time? I therefore have not sinned against you, but you are doing evil by making war against me. May Yahweh the judge today between the sons of Israel and the sons of Ammon. But the kings of the sons of Ammon did not listen to the words which Jephthah sent him. Now, all right, so far so good. God, he's trying to work with them, but are they? Well, we know how this goes. Well, we know it's not. There's going to be some error, right? So here we go. The 29th verse, 11th chapter. Now the Spirit of Yahweh came upon Jephthah, so that he passed through Gilead and Manasseh. Then he passed through Mizpah of Gilead. From Mizpah of Gilead he went on to the sons of Ammon. Then Jephthah made a vow to Yahweh and said, "If you will indeed give the sons of Ammon into my hand, then it shall be that whatever comes out of the doors of my house to meet me, when I return in peace from the house of Ammon, it shall be Yahweh's, and I will offer it up as a burnt offering." So Jephthah crossed over to the sons of Ammon to fight against them, and Yahweh gave them into his hand. And he struck them with a very great slaughter from Aroer to the entrance of Minnith, 20 cities, as far as Abel Keramim. So the sons of Ammon were subdued before the sons of Israel. Then Jephthah came to his house at Mizpah, and behold, his daughter was coming out to meet him with tambourines and with dancing. Now she was his one and only child. Besides her, he had no son or daughter. So it happened that when he saw her, he tore his clothes and said, "Alas, my daughter, you have brought me very low, and you are among those who trouble me. but I have opened my mouth to vow to Yahweh, and I cannot take it back. Here we go as an issue. Don't make rash vows. But here's the problem here. God did not ask for the vow. He made the vow, and he made it rashly. All right. Then he said to the father, all right. But so she said to him, my father, you have opened your mouth to vow to Yahweh. Do to me a your enemies, the sons of Ammon. Then she said to her father, let this thing be done for me. Let me alone 2 months, that I may go to the mountains and weep because of my virginity, I and my companions. Then he said, go. So he sent her away. And she went with her companions and wept on the mountains because of her virginity. And it happened at the end of 2 months that she returned to her father, and he did according to the vow which he had made, and she did not know a man. Thus it became a custom in Israel, that the daughters of Israel went yearly to commemorate the daughter of Jephthah, the Gileadite, 4 days in the year. All right, now one, that's not a holiday called by God, but two, God would never ask for the sacrifice of a person. That's something God wouldn't have done. Jephthah could have gotten out of that vow. He would have just had to offer a